Good afternoon and welcome to the EmpowerMEN podcast, where we apologise for what happened Thursday night, but our special guest has rescheduled and we're hoping the internet gods, I don't actually know if there are internet gods or not, but the internet gods will be good to us today. Mosh, how are you, buddy?
I think we all need to pray.
Yeah, that's right. It's sun's out and guns out. And just for those of you who may or may not be thinking this is a green screen behind you, it definitely is not a green screen. I wouldn't have my garden on a green screen. Our special guest today is Tim Forster. Tim Forster is an amazing husband, a phenomenal father, and maybe I should have swapped those words around, and an excellent police officer as well. And he's got such an amazing story. And what we are endeavouring to do, at least, Mosho, correct me if I'm wrong, is just to, we're not experts in any field. We're just trying to give some men something to look forward to, some hope, and all of that through, these stories that come out. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm late 40s, you're mid 40s. We've had a few decades to learn some stuff, do it the right way and the wrong way. And, so I guess we're good at being able to chat to people and draw things out of them and find out what they can teach all of us. So, yeah.
Now, I did tell you that when we're live to say mid-30s, mate, not mid-40s. But anyway, we'll forgive you for that one. We're going to bring the special guest on now.
Right,
and we'll bring Tim on. Tim, how are you, mate?
Hey, I'm back.
Tim.
Loud and clear, I hope.
You're back, and your internet is at 10 out of 10, and 10 out of 10 is always good. So we just want to start just by talking about a little bit about you, but let's recap just briefly on the story we started with on Thursday night that got all broken up, and then we'll launch off from there. Because as a police officer, you work with young people amongst shopping centres and wherever they hang out. Just tell us a little bit about your role, and then tell us what happened on Thursday night, or Thursday, because that was a pretty amazing story.
Thursday. Yeah, it's one of those little stories that always warms your heart. So yeah, it's good to be back again talking with you guys. How good is the 40s? You're talking about being in the 40s. Yes, it is a good decade, I reckon. I reckon it's been my decade of growth for sure. Yeah, most I've learnt and grown in these last 10 years. Well, not last 10 years, 6 years for me, as I'm mid 40s. But anyway, getting back to the story. So my role as a police officer in Victoria Police is a youth specialist officer. So I've been doing youth policing for 18 years or so. It's why I joined the police force really initially. It's been on passion of mine for a long time to work with young people and try and steer them straight, or offer them those opportunities, those second chances, third chances, offer our young people a better way out, I guess, as to making better decisions. So I have been doing it for a while, and the other night we were down at Greensboro Plaza. The shops are open back up. We're running a bit of an operation there, engaging with the kids as they come back. Yeah, actually handing out gift cards to the kids to go and buy themselves some Boost juice or whatever it might be, Subway. So just engaging with the kids there. And then this older guy came up to me. We'd been into JB Hi-Fi, and we walked out, and this guy followed me out of JB Hi-Fi, and was one of the staff members, and walked up to me and goes, "Excuse me, I think I know you." So I've got my mask on, he's got his mask on, and he was mid-20s, and he said, "You're Senior Tim, aren't you?" I said, "I am." I said, "You," and he said, "You came to my primary school." Probably, it would have been 13, 15 years ago. And so we stood there and we talked for a while, and he was wrapped too. Yeah, I was wrapped, but he was wrapped too, just to talk about when I used to come into the class and, showed my gun and showed my baton and all that sort of stuff. And I did ask him, I sort of said, what was one thing that you can remember that we talked about or that you learned?
Oh, that's good.
He could only really remember me taking my baton out and flicking it, and being impressed by that. So, and that's often the case. I often get that when I'm in the community. It's really nice when people come up, especially as this guy in particular. He goes, "And you haven't even aged in 15 years." So, yeah, I was pretty excited to hear that too, and just to see that response and that impact, I guess, that you make over the years. You sort of forget about a lot of that, and a lot of our work, the work that I do, it's proactive work. So we're out there doing things, it's engaging, trying to work with young people, and you don't often see the results because you don't know is going to happen to a young person. Sometimes you can predict and say, yeah, he's going to go down a certain path, but you never know. So you don't know the exact effects you've had and the lives maybe that you've impacted. So it's good to get a bit of feedback every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice that you had, you know, someone come up to you and say that to you. I mean, it would be, let's face it, it would be daunting if you're a police officer and someone says, I know you, because you're not sure what's going to come out next, whether it's going to be a positive or negative. But generally speaking, you tend to be working in the proactive space. So there should be positive stories. What was the draw card for you to get into the force? What was the catalyst? And do you remember the time when you thought, you know what, I'm going to be a police officer?
Yeah. As I sort of mentioned last time we got together, it was something that I thought about in secondary school. It was something as growing up, certainly developed a bit of a passion or a heart for young people. You know, reading those books and learning about people's testimonies, I guess, of life-changing experience when they become, say, a Christian and turning their life around, that sort of thing on the streets of New York, and developing that passion. And so I guess when I went off to university and realised that wasn't really where I wanted to be, just thinking about how can I work in the community, what can I do? But also, I guess, a bit of excitement and a bit of that action too, often draws you in as a young fella to get out and do a bit of policing. And I wrestled with it for quite a while, not knowing whether I was the right character. What is a police officer? What kind of person? You see them on TV and you sort of think, quite stereotyped. They're very assertive and serious. And did I have it to be that, that police officer? But speaking to a few police officers that I had met leading up to that time, you realise it takes all sorts of personalities, all sorts of characters, all sorts of strengths different people can bring to that job. So that's when I joined in at the age of 19, and man, I was shell shocked for the first few years. It was some of the things that I saw. It was pretty incredible. I grew up very, very fast.
Tell us some about some of the, because I mean, obviously in all of our jobs we have certain pressures and things that hit us mentally and physically. Tell us some things about maybe how you've experienced some pressure mentally, physically through your job, like maybe early and even now, and has that changed? Like have you sort of a little bit in that sense, or how's that go?
Yeah, certainly grown up a lot over the years. I was very green. I was very raw when I was a 19-year-old boy, grew up in Ballarat and come down, very innocent. I was a good Christian lad at that stage. I didn't drink and didn't swear, and lived by the good book. Obviously, that was a good grounding that I had, a good foundation. But coming and working at Brunswick Police Station back in the day when it was, back in the early to mid 90s, when all that underworld was, around the Carlton sort of area with, it was, police force was a different place back then. And starting as a young Christian, I remember I drove to work and I had P plates on my little Ford Laser, drove into the car park, and I even had, remember the fish Christian sticker on my car?
Yeah.
So it took about a week. I got a nickname of the fish. So someone had picked up on the sticker on my car. They started calling me the fish. But it was tough because there was some tough old cops, back then. And they'd seen a thing or two, and they were a bit wary of me, I think, as this young green, Christian guy. So it was really tough. And I remember one incident where one of the suspects was in custody. He'd been manhandled. He'd been, roughly dealt with, I believe. I didn't see anything, but I heard some old tactics going on in the interview room to get this guy to make some admissions. All I saw was he came out with a blood nose, and next thing he made a complaint, and I was sort of dragged through an internal investigation, and I was only months being in the job, and I remember these other police members coming to me and saying, you got to make sure you get your story straight. You got to make sure that you cover us. You heard any? Don't you? We could lose our jobs for this. So stuff like that going on. So that was difficult to deal with as a young Christian guy, and I remember think, what do I do here? I've got to tell the truth. We've got to be honest. And I think I spoke to someone quite wise, and they sort of said, just remove yourself from that situation. Just basically say you weren't there or you weren't in that location, and just try and, so you're not implicated as such. So that was hard dealing with it, but geez, increased my faith, I think, back then of praying every day on the way to work and just having that strength to get through, because it was tough as a young guy.
Yeah,
challenging. So I've grown up, I've learned a lot now, and even back then it was, my passion of joining was trying to help people addicted to drugs and substances, and try and provide a bit of light to them. And I soon realized that, look, there's people with deep, complex issues that I'm dealing with. So that was a wake-up call, and realizing that some of these people couldn't be, fixed with a, helping hand, just a friendly conversation or a bit of advice. These guys needed, some long-term, really intense support. And the job I do now, I realize, that to help some of these people that we work with, it takes a massive lot of change and support and therapy, whatever it might be. So that's certainly been plenty of challenges.
There's a bit of a school of thought out there that, and you're touching on it kind of, Tim, when you say, you were kind of grew up in a good Christian home in Ballarat, and, you hadn't seen too much, but there's a school of thought that in order to reach and go and impact the ones that are really rough, and the rough and ready young men and women, you have to have gone through it. What's your reaction to that? Because you obviously didn't go through it. So how do you battle that?
Yeah, everyone's got their stories, haven't they? Everyone's got their journey that they've been through, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about some of the stuff that I've been through and experienced, and what we learn in life. But and I think, and one of the big themes that I want to talk about today is just that empathy, and developing that understanding and empathy for anyone, for whether it be the kids that I'm dealing with, the young crooks, the young criminals, the guys that are in and out of youth detention, that sort of stuff. I think initially, for them to relate to me, probably if you can walk in and they can see that you've lived a tough and hard life, and you talk their talk and that sort of stuff, that'll probably get them in quicker initially. But I think it just takes time. It's like anything. It's any relationship, any connection that you make with someone. You just got to work at it. You just got to show that you're non-judgmental. In my line of work, you can't be lecturing them. You can't be like a mum or dad that's trying to give that constant lecture and don't do this, don't do that. Like a lot of people in the work that I do when I work with these young people. So basically my job is keeping an eye on them, supervising them within the community. A lot of people saying, well, you need to go around and tell them to pull their head in. You need to go around and tell them to behave and that sort of stuff. And that doesn't work. These kids aren't listening to that. They're not there for a lecture. They've got such deep issues of where they've come from, what they've experienced, the trauma they've seen, and that sort of stuff. They're not really going to benefit from just a lecture, or tell them to behave. Don't commit any more crimes. That doesn't work. It's just that building that relationship with them, and softly, I think, getting them to understand. A lot of people still say, "Oh, back in the old days, you should just give them a clip over the ears, and they'd be fine, and they'd smarten up." And it's probably the case for a lot of kids, but some of the kids I deal with, a clip over the ears not going to do much. It's going to make them a whole lot worse and more angry.
Yeah. So have you got a certain amount of proactive stuff you're doing as well as the reactive stuff, like going into schools and that sort of thing? Tell us a bit about, because obviously if you can get to some of these kids before they offend or before they, have an incident, then, is that sort of part of what you do?
Yep. So we've got a two-tier approach. So my role now is dealing mainly with the ones that, where the horse is already bolted, sort of thing, and trying to keep them. And this is a new role that they brought in, I think, after youth crime has increased over the last few years with certain gangs and things that hear about on the media. My role is to really deal with those kids that are in and out of youth detention. There's another role who I work with. I've got a colleague who does the schools work, and that's the work I did for years and years out at Epping Police Station, working in the schools, early intervention, and that's very rewarding. That's where the kids, you got a captive audience. You can go in and work with the kids there, and you can also target the ones which that a bit at risk, the ones that are doing a bit of shop stealing or starting to get into a bit of trouble. You can also work with them as well. So look, the police force it's come a long way over the years, and we proactively engage with all these kids now, and we work closely with lots of counsellors, youth workers, social workers, DHS and the like. Yeah, there's a lot of people working around these kids and trying to do all that we can to support them.
Which is brilliant when you think about it, the amount of resources that are put into helping young people, because, you know, sometimes their circumstances are seriously out of their control. Just a quick one. You mentioned crime rates have gone up. Given that Melbourne's just come out of lockdown, I'm just curious, did crime rates go down during lockdown? Because, you know, they weren't allowed out. So did they behave, or was it the same?
It's one of those other further natural, I guess, consequence or benefit from COVID. Yeah, for sure. Crime rate's gone down, less kids, less young people out on the street, less people in general out on the street. I've speak to parents of these kids that they can't control and saying, gee, that my kids have been really good during this time. That actually have stuck, you know, some kids have even stuck by the COVID curfews more than they would stick by their normal bail curfews. A lot of these kids have been on you know, bail curfews. They've got to be home by 8 o'clock at night and that sort of stuff. But I guess because there's been no one out at night, they haven't taken the risk of breaching that bail and going out, because they know the police, as soon as they see them, they're going to check them and could cop a $1,600 fine. Or so it certainly slowed things down. Crime's down in general, for sure. So that's why we're out at Greensborough Plaza last week. Things are opened up again. We're out trying to talk to the kids and prevent stuff, because everyone's pretty restless. They're all out. They're ready to rumble and have a bit of fun. So that's why we're trying.
Well, there's the answer worldwide. If we just keep spreading the pandemic, crime
I know.
We'll see. Where did this empathy you talked about, which is quite, I would say, well, I shouldn't say. Let me ask this question. It must be unique amongst the police force for someone like yourself who works in the police force to talk about empathy as being a key factor in helping young people. And I think it is. I think it's fantastic, and I know you well enough to know you are very empathetic and very caring. Where did this come from? Where did you draw on this empathy? How do you get to a point where, you know, you've got a young person that might be really getting under your skin? How do you get that empathy to just love them?
So it's funny because I was thinking about this leading up to this podcast, and I am reminded when I was a teenager, I distinctly remember thinking, now when I grow up, I want to think still like a teenager. I want to be able to relate to young people. When I was a teenager, I loved playing with younger kids and hanging out with little kids as well. And, you know, because I remember along my journey in life, I remember people that made impacts. I remember people that would take the time as even a little kid to play with you, to hang out with you, and you'd love that. So as a teenager, I then remember, you know, older blokes hanging out with me and learning stuff from them. So I guess that's where I promised myself, and I still remember that when I grow up, I want to be able to still look at teenagers and think like they think, relate to what they're thinking about. I know that's been a great benefit, but sometimes it's not. And I've done that with my own son, Zach, and I've thought, right, I've got to think like him, but we're different though as well. So I've also learned that not everyone's had the same journey as me. And, you know, Zach hasn't done certain things that I did or reacted to certain things the way I did as well. But I don't know, but that empathy is massive. And I talk about it all the time. Because I get police coming up to me and saying, you know, I dealt with such and such the other day. He was such a little so-and-so, and you know, he's a pain in the neck, and he's just smart ass to me and all this sort of stuff. And I just try and get them I just say, do you know where that kid's come from? Do you know his backstory? Do you know what's happened? And get people to think about it. And look, we're running some training for police, and we've got some training coming up for just the local police at Heidelberg, just to talk about the trauma and stuff that these kids go through. And I think it's so important. But at the same time, when I'm working with kids and get an opportunity with kids, because young people often come to me and say, dealt with such and such copper the other day. he grabbed me and threw me to the ground, or he arrested me and handcuffed me. And I said, oh, okay, so what happened there? And then the story will be elaborated, and they go, oh yeah, well, I saw the coppers and I ran because I was breaking into a car, and they chased me, and then they threw me on the ground and different stuff. And I sort of worked through that. Oh, obviously they've been arrested for something and tried to resist arrest, so that's why. But I also talked to the kids think about that police officer. What have they dealt with that night? They might have come from, a car crash, a domestic violence incident, a death of a child incident. You don't know what they've dealt. They might be on their 10th day straight working. They're on night shift. They're exhausted. So, yeah, it's just it's two sides, that whole empathy sort of thing. But, yeah, working with kids and working with the police members as well.
Well, I mean, that empathy is I'd imagine it, like I said, you would be countercultural within the force, that it wouldn't be the normal thing. You wouldn't go through the academy and part of the module of your training wouldn't be empathy. So you drawing this out is quite incredible. And, let's call a spade a spade. This is my opinion. I personally love police officers, and I think they're fantastic. I've got a lot of friends who are police officers, but they've had the rough end of the stick the last year or two around the Black Lives Matter, around people comparing it to America. I do think it is a really tough job. How on earth have you kept your head? Because you're very cool, calm, collected. You probably wouldn't say this, but it takes a lot to get you fired up. How on earth do you keep your head and not get fired up and, stay calm in a sense? Like what are the things that get under your skin that drive you batty in a sense?
Yeah, it can be difficult, some of those things. I mean, I generally am very tolerant. Sometimes people say too tolerant and too forgiving, or, too, yeah, you got to fire up. I want to see that fire in your belly. And working things like, and recently, working at a Black Lives Matter rally protest in the city. That's difficult because you're there, you're in uniform. The people there marching along and chanting these chants, and people abusing you, and that sort of thing. That's hard because they don't know you. They don't know your story. They don't know, who I am and what. And so you then tend to just take on that uniform and just be, well, we're police. We're going to be hard line then. And you step out of line, you're going to be arrested, that sort of thing. It's difficult. Look, overall, I think, as I said, the police force has changed a lot over 20, 30 years, a lot more tolerant. The Black Lives Matter one, that was, obviously got a lot of coverage. That particular incident, obviously with George Floyd, that was, every police member that I spoke to was horrified by that, couldn't believe that. And it was good to see, when things started, that fired a lot of people up. But when you'd see those protests where police started taking a knee and police started to say, hey, we don't accept that either. What a great opportunity for change then, and to, show that police are human and don't go along with that sort of stuff. The whole racial issue though is, very, very difficult to deal with. Because we have, obviously our unconscious bias and things that we hold on to, and the people and situations that we deal with. Yeah, it's hard not to let that affect you sometimes. So, it can be difficult. Not too much else fires me up, though. It's probably more watching the football when, in previous years when Richmond hasn't done so well, or Richmond gets beaten. But, that's, I guess.
That's not very often.
Really, seriously, I think the football is the thing that makes me the most fired up out of anything.
Yeah. And I mean, you like your sport and you have your outlets with your sport and your basketball and all that sort of stuff as well. Tell us just how you've managed to stay in a very I consider it to be very healthy in your marriage, because your wife as well, I don't know if you want to say her name or what she does, but I know she's in a very high pressure job, and you guys have had to manage both high pressure jobs in her role and in your role, both in shift work. How have you managed? What things have you put in place to help foster that relationship and not just exist as a couple, but you guys are deeply in love? It's a little sickening. Deeply in love with the way you interact. It's nice to see.
Yeah, it's been 20 25 years coming up in December. So yeah, we were married very young, obviously 21. So yeah, a lot. We've learnt a lot. We've grown a lot. We've been on a journey through that time. You know, you get distracted along the way. You get busy. You have the kids. The kids are nearly, you know, young adults now, 17, 18, and you go through your different phases, your different stages of your marriage too. You got with your young kids and all the families and other couples that you hang out with, and yeah, that sort of changes as kids go through their adolescence. I think for us, we've always kept very active and proactively busy, engaged in things, engaged in community, sporting events, holidays, lots of holidays together. We're both pretty fortunate with the amount of leave that we get. You know, I get nine weeks holidays a year. Briley gets 5 or 6. So yeah, we've had some amazing holidays over the time, some big trips that we've taken. So that's always something to look forward to. But I think it's getting to that point of that interdependence too within a relationship. So not a dependence, a healthy interdependence of having your own space, having your own life, your own personality, your own identity, and not have your whole identity based on your partner. You know, that takes a while to get used to or to work at. But you know, I've had opportunity. Briley is just the most amazing woman of, you know, been so tolerant of me, and you know, I've done motorbike trips over the last few years with mates and taken off around the world and done that. We both travel for work. She's had a international trips through work, which has been good. So it's still been allowed to have that part of your life and to be able to live that, but also be that interdependence where you're still close and you communicate, you travel together, you know, just over the, you know, obviously this year, just the amount of walking that we've done together. I think walking is just one of the most, today we just went out for a 12K walk through the bush out near Sugar Lake Reservoir. Just the time that you can spend together, and it just stimulates conversation. It just forces you to talk and to communicate. And that's been just the biggest, I guess, savior over the last 10 months or so in this phase of our marriage. So yeah, there's a few things, I guess, that's kept us going, but we laugh a lot. She laughs at me. Humor is always important. That's been a big part of it.
I've certainly always considered her to be a very funny woman. I love her stories and love her jokes. We've had a question that's come in from my wife, actually. She's written on Facebook. She's written, how can I stop nagging my husband? Oh, no, sorry, that's my speaker. She's written, my question for Tim is, what advice would you give to dads with teenagers, especially those who are starting to show challenging behaviour? And I need to put a precursor in here. This is not about our kids. Our kids are phenomenal. And we've got good relationship with kids, just like all of us, actually, all three of us have really good relationship with our kids. But I think she's speaking in general. You know, what advice would you give to dads who are starting to show challenging behaviours as they turn into teenagers?
Yeah. I think with anything, whether it be the marriage, whether it be kids, whether it be work colleagues, it's that listening. You got to listen to people. You got to listen to your kids. Some people can do this well. Some people struggle to do this. Some people think they do it well, but they don't. They think they're listening with their ears. They're, you know, listening to the words that are coming out of their kids' mouths. But it's not just about the words coming out of their mouths. It's about being in tune with what this young person or this person really wants or desires, or what they're feeling, what they're struggling with. So it's taking that time to be able to listen. So once again, it's that empathy sort of thing. But and with teenagers in particular, it certainly doesn't start when they're teenagers. It's building that relationship with that young person, obviously through preteens or through childhood. And to me, that's about doing stuff together. It's about finding common activities, common interests, connecting with the young people. It's about not what's it called, autobiography, or whatever, which is trying to get them, or thinking they're going to live the same life that you lived. thinking that they should act the way that you acted and their story should be the same as your story. That's not going to be the case with any child. They're all going to be a little bit different. So you've got to show quite a fair bit of tolerance too. You might have certain expectations or certain standards that you want your kids to live by as well. You got to be flexible in that too, because as we found with our two kids, they're completely opposites. They're complete opposites. So what works with one doesn't work for the other. So you got to be flexible. I've been pretty flexible and pretty relaxed. As you know, Raph, my supervision sometimes is not ideal when we've got kids. This funny story. How's this story? When my son Zach playing with Bay.
Oh, you don't have to tell this story. This is fun.
I know.
Anyway, go on.
Out the front of our house, so the boys are just mucking around. Boys will be boys. Playing cricket or something, and something got stuck up in the tree. I'm sitting on the couch watching the cricket. It was a nice sunny afternoon, and next thing I see, the boys carrying Bay through the backyard into our pool, and they dipped him in the pool, and the pool was pretty cold. They dipped his leg in there or something. And I'm looking out the window. I didn't get up yet. I wasn't too concerned, but and then next thing I see the boys carrying Bay out again, and I walk out and say, "What's going on?" And Zach's all, "But Bay just fell out of a tree. That's all." I said, "Okay." And we're going to help him walk home. I think they were going to get the wheelbarrow or something.
They did get the wheelbarrow. They wheeled him here in a wheelbarrow.
But they got the wheelbarrow. Anyway, cut a long story short. I asked Zach to show me, what do you mean? What tree did he fall out of? He took me out to the tree and pointed up. And I think we measured in the end. It was about 6 meters, wasn't it? 6 meters up he fell. And this is a guy who's running, national level athletics. And what did he do, Raph? He broke.
He ended up walking into the hospital actually, and interesting in light of what your wife does. But she went to the hospital and they did the X-ray. He walked in, and then they worked out within an hour that he'd broken bones in both feet. So that wasn't too good because he had to pull out the nationals then. But he's thankfully, I think about that quite often, that if he had landed on his head, on his back, on his side, that would have been very detrimental. But thankfully he's good. Now, we've talked about your kids and your kids are, Mosh, your kids are fantastic. And Tim, your kids are phenomenal. They're great. How have you, you talked about it being, not wanting to live vicariously, like the parent not getting the kid to do what you think the kid should do. But the opposite is true too, right? If you've had an upbringing or something's happened in your upbringing, which is true for my case, you don't want your kids to go through that. So you drive yourself the complete opposite of that. And it almost becomes, in a sense, detrimental for your parenting because, you're trying to desperately not to give them the same upbringing as what you've had. Does that I don't know if that's making sense to you.
Yep.
What kind of things happened in your upbringing that you just didn't want to bring up in your kids? You just didn't want your kids to experience the same thing. I don't know your parents very well, but
yeah. So I had a great childhood. Once again, we were a pretty close family. We traveled a lot. We took 12 months off when I was just a young kid in about 5 or 6, took 12 months off and traveled around Australia in a caravan, and that was pretty unheard of back in the late 70s. That was amazing. So we lots of good memories from those times. But my life was absolutely shell shocked at the age of 14. So my father, he'd become born again Christian, and Mum and Dad started going to church, and their life changed dramatically, and everything was looking rosy. And then Dad, he took on a new business venture, and it was really it was a bit of a dud right from the word go, and obviously completely got him down and got depression, which I wasn't aware of, and ended up committing suicide. So that was the age of 14, and an absolute shock to me, of course, that happened as I woke up one morning with police knocking on the front door and people coming into the house, and Mum calling us up to the front living room to tell us this news that she'd found found dad dead in the backyard. So that was pretty horrific to go through as a young 14-year-old and not having much experience with suicide or mental health or anything. It just wasn't spoken about much back in that day, but an amazing time of development, of support through the local church that we're involved in then. Lots of people came around and helped mum out and helped her run the business and helped in the family home. So I had an older brother and sister, so we certainly all came very close over that time. And that's going to impact your life, of course. There's obvious effects from that, going through that and how that's going to affect you as a father. And, from that day on, obviously, and the things that I missed out on with my own father, it was another, I guess, legacy or another thing that I instilled in myself to be the best and the best father that I could possibly be. And to be there for my kids, and when Zach turned 18 this year, and that's proud moments now. And to watch Zach graduate from school, that's just the simple things, but just to be there, and that's all the stuff that I missed out with my dad, and just holding on to that as a father and looking forward to those things, I guess too, to watch my kids grow and thrive, and to be there for these events, and just kept reminding myself, no matter how things get hard for me or if things get dark for me, that just that motivation is to stay healthy, stay well, and be there for your family, and be present all the time.
Thank you for sharing. That would have been ridiculously hard as a 14-year-old boy, and you would have. I know you talked about before that when you joined the force, you would have had to grow up fast, but that time would have caused you to grow up fast and experience things that you hadn't experienced before. What have you put in place for your own personal mental health? Because, I don't know you deeply and personally, but I know you well enough to know that you seem like a very together young man. You've got an excellent relationship with your wife and with your kids, like we talked about. Obviously, your mental health, I shouldn't say obviously, but I think your mental health is very strong. What have you put in place to keep your mental health healthy?
Yeah, certainly. Always been active. That's been a big part of it. Yeah, physically fit, active. I do enjoy reading lots of different things and learning and listening to lots of different things as well. I've got a couple of close relationships. I don't know that. I'd say that I've got a lot of close friends, but I've got a couple of key people, which is good. You've still got to get a tune up every now and then. I did go off to see a psychologist a couple of years ago, so that was just a good phase to go through, or good support and talk about different things. And that's probably around coming up to the same age that my dad was when he had issues, and I think that's a bit of a trigger, or a certain age too, where you come up to your midlife. That typical midlife crisis sort of thing, where things are changing, where kids are growing up, and you can get stuck in the rut or the mundane. So just to have that bit of a tune up, and I think it's good for anyone to get involved with a professional to help talk through that sort of stuff. But
definitely, it would be. I'm guessing that is another thing that's a little different. Like, I don't know what year your dad did what he did, but I'm guessing it would have been 80s. Yep. So the 80s. Back then, even the 90s, it wasn't talked about. Mental health for men especially just wasn't talked about. It's still gathering momentum, and still there's an education piece around it. So, you're very passionate for mental health and youth suicide prevention and all of that. That's really important. How have you continued to foster that? Like, what do you do to educate that?
Yeah, I think it's about being open to and real, I guess, about your own struggles or your own issues, and not be afraid to talk about that with people. And people are often shocked. I guess with me, the danger, I guess, or the risk is that I can act like it's all okay and it's all fine, and dealing with everything.
Right.
Yeah, as you've just said, Raph, would assume it would be obvious that I'd be, healthy, have mental, my mental health would be A1, but no, you still struggle. You still struggle with that motivation, or that some days where you can't be bothered, or and it's all those usual things, isn't it? It's healthy exercise. I'm sure Mosh certainly can vouch for that with the people that he's working with, and the feedback people would give.
And like, would you say, like, let's say to someone in a similar situation to back when you were a teenager, what would you tell them? Having looked back from where you are now, looking back to that time, and it must have been such a blur, I guess, for years. To try and work through.
Yeah.
There are a couple of key things that you could, let's say to someone who's not part of a church or not part of a community, what would you say?
Yeah. So I had a situation a couple of years ago where a guy in this community committed suicide, a guy who I knew through the local football club. And he had a son. Right. He had a 14-year-old son. And it sort of shook me up a bit. Right. Yeah. So, and he was an amazing man, this guy that actually took his own life. But just the pressures of life got to him, and sporting clubs and different things. So look, it was a difficult situation. But I went around and visited him, spoke to the mum, and I shared a bit of my story as well and what I'd been through. And the biggest thing I think is about the anger, and about, because you can be so annoyed. Suicide, people say it's the most selfish of acts, but I've never really thought like that, because that would just take over your life as far as the anger. And you just got to remember that person was really not well. You got to remember that their mental health has gone down, and it's not the person that or you love, I guess, because of the issues that they're currently presented with. So, and that's what when I went and visited this young guy, I said, that wasn't really your dad. He just become so unwell that he's not making clear decisions, not making, so don't look back at that. Don't hold on to that as anger and blame. And, you can be annoyed, you can be pissed off, I guess, but just got to move past that point so you don't hold on to that, because otherwise, that's just going to eat you up, that anger and that frustration of what. And I went through stages of that, and being jealous of other kids whose dads were around, and jealous of, I remember ticking off one of my friends when we were young because he was angry at his dad because he made him do something. And I said, how would you at least you've got a dad, sort of thing. So, I remember lashing out. So it's just dealing with that, and, realising that, through suicide, it's horrible, but it's unfortunately where a person gets to believing that they got nothing else, no other hope, no other decision, nothing else that can help them, but we can help them, and there is help, and there's, it's an interesting fact in relation to suicide at the moment, because I was starting to hear a few through the current situation and through work. I heard a few suicides coming through, and I thought, gee, the stats must be going through the roof. But when the stats actually came out, and suicide hadn't increased a big amount. There was no real increase of suicide over this last sort of 10 months, which I was fascinated by. But the actual contact with patients, and there was an increase in people getting help. There was an increase with people, having breakdowns and not coping, that's for sure. But I think they're just getting the help now. I think they are getting the support, and they're working through those issues, not getting to that point of taking their lives. I mean, there's plenty of issues out there, but there's plenty of help as well.
I know I train quite a few psychologists in here, and their workload has just increased massively. So I think that in a way that's a good thing, I think, because people who have things going on, they're actually seeking help, and I think it's a bit more, it's a bit more okay now to go and seek help, even as a guy, to be able to go, well, I can't fix my car now with all the computerized stuff. I need someone to help do that. So if I can't fix what's going on mentally, then I'm going to go and get some help. So I think that's a really positive thing.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
But I think you're onto something, Tim, and Mosho as well, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Lifeline and Beyond Blue and these helplines, they claim to have and I believe him, that the increase and demand on the phone lines is grown 70%, sometimes up to 100% at times. So when I heard that, and then the coroner came out with what you just talked about in the newspaper about 2 months ago and said that the suicide rates this time last year was exactly the same, in fact, less by one. I found that really odd. I couldn't correlate that, but I hadn't thought about what you said, that actually people are now starting to realize the alarm bells a little earlier and get onto it a lot quicker, and therefore maybe alleviate something that would have happened. Because my guess is, as a 14-year-old boy, you wouldn't have seen the signs in dad and had the alarm bells there, and that's probably, well, I shouldn't say, but I'm guessing that would have had a fair amount of shock attached to it, because it was all going rosy, everything was fine on the outside, but then it happened. What are some alarm bells people you think should take heed of when, you know, in your mind, they should get some help, do something about it? What are some things that they need to really take heed of?
Yeah, so hopefully it's about, once again, we're talking about, you know, listening to people, and as in reading people, understanding people, so getting to know people, and you notice a change in their behaviour, I guess. There's obvious signs of increased drinking or increased, you know, just removing themselves from situations, withdrawing, that sort of stuff. I think we can see that in people that we know, the people that are close to us, and we hear about it all the time now. You know, the "Are you okay" day and those sorts of days, which is really good. I mean, we don't just do that one day, but it's trying to check in with people, trying to ask them okay. You know, and even getting to the point of saying, "Oh, do you feel like hurting yourself?" You know, covering those tough questions, and even just asking that question, verbalizing it, I reckon, out loud, people will then go, "Oh no, don't be stupid. No, I'd never do that, never do that." But at least it gets it out in the open and gets them out expressing it and talking about it. So I think that's pretty cool.
And I think there's I heard about a questionnaire the other day, the K10 mental health test, where you can go on to, I think it's Beyond Blue and a few different websites, and you just Google K10 and it asks you a series of questions. You want to just sleep as you normally do, or there's a whole range of questions that sort of gives you a bit of an indication as to where you might be at. So
so many.
Now we've got all these extra resources, and we're a bit more aware than even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think that's a really good thing too.
Yep.
Now, Tim, I don't know if you know, but there's a what sort of was a catalyst for Mosh and I just having these kinds of discussions, very real blokey discussions, was a group that we joined called Blokes United. And look, that group, I don't know if you've heard about it or not. You've probably heard about it in the media, but it grew to 21,000 within 2 weeks. And I've been part of that group since early days, and the men sharing in there is phenomenal. Like, it's not like a normal Facebook group. People are very gentle with each other. I guess anyone listening to your story, and there'd be a lot of blokes in that Blokes United group that would take a lot from there. What would you say to someone who's struggling right now and you were sitting next to them? What advice would you give, not as a police officer, but just as Tim Forster, the all-round legendary guy that you are?
Find your peace, I guess. Find that place where you can sit and just discover who you are. There's so much stuff in life at the moment. So many distractions. There's so many good, healthy things. There's so many destructive things out there that try and distract us or take our minds off who we are. And I think that over the last few years for me has been a key too, is to work out who am I? Who am I as Tim Forster? You know, a lot of people could probably write, you know, who they think I am, which is all and good, but you got to live up to that as well, and you got to live up to what people think you are. But who are you actually? Find out, you know, what's important to you. I've had a real look at what my values are over the last few years, and what truly is it that makes me as a person and what I'm sticking to. And obviously, still the Bible, still God's been a huge part of my life. But for those that don't have that, obviously that's a great answer and great place to go to look for some answers. But if you don't, you've just got to strip back everything else, strip back the stuff that's happened in your life that's caused you to carry so much, to be so weighed down. We all, live a life, and as I said, different journeys and different traumatic things, or different relationships, or different things that are broken down or haven't worked out the way that we would have hoped. So just get out, talk to someone, find someone that listens, get back to that again, find someone that listens, that can tune into who you are and what you're all about. Someone that's not going to judge, someone that's not just going to give advice, someone that's just going to listen. And, as blokes, we need to do that. We need to do that more and more. We're so quick to provide answers. We're so quick to, judge or be critical of people and think, I'd never do that. So don't come around here telling me that sort of stuff if you're going to do that. So it's just trying to have that listening ear and talk to people. And we say the sun's always going to come up tomorrow. That's easy to say, but you do pass through these phases too. You pass through these stages where you're feeling down and out. And I watched a good clip the other day of a young guy, and YouTube clip. He's only a young guy, but he's got some inspirational stuff to share online, and he's just a vlogger, travels the world and does all sorts of fantastic fun things. But his simple one was, action leads to motivation. You get up in the morning, you can't be bothered. You can't be bothered doing this and that. But as soon as you take that action, as soon as you get up out of bed, as soon as you do something, that leads to a little bit of motivation. You get motivated by that. We dropping out?
Oh, sorry. You lost me for a minute there?
Hey there. He's back. You're back?
Yeah. Believe it or not, it's my internet that's the issue now. Internet.
One job, right?
One job, yeah, exactly. Except I'm doing about 4. But you hit on it pretty hard, Tim, and I think what you said before I dropped out was that friendships are really important, and you've got those. You talked about it before, those 1 or 2 guys that you can ring and say, today is a tough day, or I'm really struggling with this. It is very hard, I'll say, as maybe not as just men, maybe it's not just men, but certainly it's hard as men, to foster those really healthy relationships, to foster those deep personal relationships with other men, because generally speaking, men don't talk deep. Men like to stay surface and everything's all right and how you going, mate? I'm good, kind of thing. Before we finish, what would you say to a man to give him advice to foster those deep relationships?
So what I do with one of my good mates, because we talked about, we're not phone people. I'm not really a phone person.
Yeah.
I don't like picking up the phone and chatting to people. I've got to sort of be in the right mood. And I mean, when I do it, I enjoy it. Once again, it's taking that action. Got to kick myself in the butt a bit to get on the phone and ring people.
Right.
So what we decided to do with this mate, him and I, we do a number system. So we can just send a quick text message, and we just do a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh, okay.
10 being really good. So if you send, and you just could send a quick message. What number are you today? Where are you on the scale? How are you feeling?
That's
so if you're hitting a 6 or a 5 or a 6, they're getting a bit down. So you might then follow that up, or you might go a bit deeper with that. But 7, 8, 9, 10, it's good encouragement and good day. And that's just such a non-threatening way to do it, and such an easy way just to reach out to someone. Is it lazy? No, I don't think it's lazy. I think it's just an easy way for guys who not necessarily going to open up on the phone and share everything. But it's just a good way to do it. And you can do that with your kids.
Very practical tool, I think.
It is, yeah.
How to do that with anyone, any sort of friendships that you have with, and like you say, with your kids and that sort of thing too. It's sort of non-confronting, but it gives the person an opportunity to open up. Yeah.
What a great tip. I love that tip, and I'm going to implement it and pretend I made it up. I've loved all your answers here, Tim. You've got such a wealth of knowledge, and we've only got a couple of minutes left. But you might have already answered this, but we always ask each guest a question to finish on. And it doesn't need to be related to what we've talked about, but this is the question. What one piece of advice would you give to another man to help be a better version of themselves? Because that's what we're trying to do here.
I think it's probably what I've covered a lot, in relation to how's this? I'll bring out a Bible verse at the end. Because I was going to say this anyway, so I looked it up, made sure I got the Bible verse right before I shared it. But it's from James 1:19, I think, which is. Do you know that, Raph, offhand?
No, I don't offhand. I should.
Mosh, do you know? Testing.
Once you started, I will.
Yeah. Just remember, be slow to speak.
This is you down pat.
Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Yeah, I think we can be too quick to jump on things. We can be too quick to jump down someone's throat. We can be too quick to give advice, to say stuff, but just slow it down. And I mean, that was a skill that I learned back because I did a course in interviewing children. Victims of child abuse, sexual assault. So I used to work in that job, in that field.
Wow.
And, we got taught how to interview children and extract information from them. So we weren't sort of coercing them or coaching them as to what to say. And it's just that, it's just learning to listen to people. It's just allowing that awkward pause, that silence, and listening to someone when they're talking and understanding where they're coming from. So I think that's, as blokes, we can do that. And it's not just listening to the words, it's trying to listen to the person's heart or listen to the person's soul or spirit as to what they're all about, what they want, what motivates them, how they tick as a person. So if we can do that better, I think we'll all have better relationships and more satisfying relationships at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's awesome. And we want to thank you for bringing your personal life into the public sort of forum, because that's not easy for some people, and particularly for someone in your job and that sort of thing, that sometimes you like to keep that personal stuff hidden away, but you brought it into that public version of you, and we really appreciate that. So thanks very much for coming on.
No worries. Appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, what you guys are doing is fantastic. So anything else I can help out with or be involved with, let me know. Yeah, I think it's great, and I'll be tuning in the future.
Thanks, mate. We appreciate that. I'll be seeing you as I drive down the street, I'm sure. Funny story, Mosh. We after lockdown 1, we decided to just have a few family neighbours around to have a bit of a barbecue thing, and everyone's like, "Are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to do this? I'm not sure. We're allowed to do this." It was just out the front. Fire. Down comes this cop car, lights and siren. I'm like, uh-oh. One of my neighbours bolted, and I'm like, this is not happening. And then winds down the window, and it's Tim. Hey, mate, how are you? Like, it's good to see you. I'm like, you gave me a heart attack. A heart attack. And my neighbours don't like me anymore.
That was funny. It was good. Good setup.
It was. It was. Hey, I echo what Mosh has said. Thanks heaps for being part of this. Thanks for sharing so deeply. And we really appreciate you sharing so vulnerably, because you're in a pretty high-profile role, and I just want to say again, I love police officers. Keep up the good work. I think you do an amazing job as being a police officer, and a fantastic husband and father, and brilliant stuff. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff. And next week, Raph.
Oh yeah, next week we have Matt Taverner.
Yes, Matt Taverner. We have a guy who has given me heaps of business advice and financial advice over the years, and he runs a finance company, and he's got a whole lot of stuff going on in different situations business-wise. So we want to sort of glean some of the nuggets of gold from him next week in terms of business and, starting businesses and things you've learnt from failing in business and all sorts of things. So I think that'll be a really good chat. And we're back to Thursday night.
Thursday night, if the technology gods will help us.
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. Hey, thanks heaps, Tim.
Good on you.
See ya.